Hello, good evening, and welcome to the second SLN show on YouTube. And thank you for joining all of us this evening. So, at SLN, our endeavor has always been creating platforms, creating properties that can add a lot of value to all our stakeholders, be it school principals, teachers, and parents. And with that aim in mind, we've created this platform of the SLN show. So, every week, our endeavor is to try and bring you topics which are relevant, pertinent, which can add some value to what you're doing either in school education or in terms of parenting. So last week we started off our show, and the aim of the last week's talk was how can you engage your child effectively during lockdown. Today we are talking about Father's Cafe and the role of effective and effective communication in parenting. So to join me on this show, I have two fathers. One who's joining us from Atlanta, Georgia, Viral Parekh. So Viral is hi Viral, how are you?
Hi, how are you? I'm good.
So Viral is an educational entrepreneur and is an educational entrepreneur, and he's been associated with a lot of schools in India through the AI, that's the American Enrichment Institute. He also his programs are for math and for English, and he also runs these in a lot of public schools in the US. Besides that, he also has a lot of other interests in terms of his business, but at heart, he's a pure educationist, and his passion is education. And he's a father of a 2.5-year-old. Thank you, Viral. I know it's early morning in Georgia, but thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Thank you. And in fact, so Viral is coming to us from Georgia, and I don't know how many of you all follow the American news. So Georgia is one of the first states to actually lift the lockdown. So I'm sure things would be some semblance of normality will come to their lives very soon. Our second guest for this evening show is Mr. Rushabh Turakia. So Rushabh is the founder of one of the largest kindness initiatives, not only in our country but in the world. It's called Your Turn Now, and the idea of that initiative is to spread kindness. So he does talks with school students, with college students, and distributes something known as kindness cards. And he asks them to carry forward the chain of kindness. And his initiative has benefited thousands of students, not only in India but across 48 countries. Thank you, Rushabh, for joining us.
Thank you, Hussein, for inviting me. Pleasure talking about
Yes,
something
so
different topic.
thank you. And so Rushabh is a 15-year-old father. His son is in grade 9, so he calls himself a 15-year-old father. And my name is Hussein Dohadwala. I'm the co-founder of the SLN School Leaders Network, and I've been an academician for the last 15 years, associated with international schools. My forte lies with the IB and the Cambridge program, and I also work with the IB, looking at new schools who want to start the IB program and get into the IB journey. I'm also a career coach for grade 11 and 12, and a father of a 6-year-old. So today I'm in the capacity of purely a father. I'll leave my educator and my career coach hats aside for today. So once again, thank you to both of you all for joining us. Thank you to Francis, for helping us with all the technology and to ensure that, we are set up and we are, live on this platform. So my first question to both of you all today is that, the lockdown has given us an amazing opportunity as fathers, right, to spend so much time with our kids, which otherwise we would not get. So how has your fatherhood evolved during the lockdown time? So I know in Atlanta also, you'll have had a lockdown for almost 4.5 weeks, where you spend so much time, the entire day with your child. How do you think your fatherhood has evolved during this period, Viral?
Definitely, there's been a significant more amount of time dedicated to parenting. The thing as a passionate educator and father that I appreciated is just the sheer observation time. Being able to actually watch my child for such extended period of time, see what he's interested in, see how he's developing, see how he's changing over the weeks, has been really rewarding. And having fun indoors, have really explored our horizons and having educational fun indoors, and creating learning experiences that are probably outside of my norm, even such as cooking or having more reflection time throughout the day.
Oh, great. So, in fact, yes, I'm sure I can relate to what you're saying. So like my son goes to an IB school, and I'm never very clued on to what unit of inquiry he's actually following. But since the last 3-4 weeks, because I also help him, just to get set up, because he's 6 year old and his school uses Microsoft Teams for online teaching and learning. So when he goes online, I'm just around, just to help him with any troubleshooting. And I keep hearing what his teacher's talking about. So I try and link a lot of things that we do with what he's actually learning in the unit. So I've actually become, definitely, I think all of us have become much more hands-on than we have been in the past.
Absolutely. So yeah, the observation has really been what's the most rewarding. Ideas are, coming to mind as to what I can do once the lockdown is over, and just all the different things that I had plans for that I feel that maybe my child is ready, maybe my child is not ready. It's allowed me so much observation time to actually plan out parenting, if you will.
Okay, thanks, Viral, for the perspective. So Rusha, now we move from a 2.5-year-old father, 15-year-old father. And yes, perspective obviously is very different. And the whole idea of actually having three fathers on the show who have children of age group, so our audience can get a variety of perspectives. How is fatherhood for you, for a 15-year-old child? How has that evolved?
For me, we always have, in fact, every day, last 15 years, we have been lots of quality time. And generally, at least 2 meals are together, the breakfast and dinner. But now with the lockdown, 2 more meals have been added. One is lunch for sure, and then, but since actually you're at home, there's an added meal also which comes. Yes, and there's more time spent with him, teaching him things which he wasn't, we weren't doing, like cooking, and that's what natural with his mom. And also I taught him to play cards, the basic games, not one with the money, but the
Right.
which we used to play as kids. So we taught him that, which this generation didn't know how to play. And then I also talked to him about the kind of social work I do on an everyday basis. So since he's at home, it's like frequent communication which happens. And it's more so, I think I'm pushing him more for to develop his talents. Like he wanted to do a stand-up article, stand-up comedy for a couple of years now. I think because of lockdown, we were able to do it, manage it.
Right.
Passion of singing. So with this, we also made a video for him. So there are lots of things which were not happening, I think, because of the tight schedules of both of us, which have
Right.
happened now. And I think that's been, and also nowadays, everybody plays games online. The family
Mm-hmm.
plays, friends plays different kind of games. So we see a good teamwork and how we try to win all the games. And there's also a way to, there's some games where you use Google, and how smart you use Google to win the game or be the first one to answer. There's lots of bonding during this lockdown.
Okay. So yeah, that's great actually to get that perspective, because to keep a 15-year-old engaged for an entire day for almost 5 weeks, this is the first week in India that we are actually under lockdown, is not always easy. And yeah, it's great. Being a career coach, I often also advise a lot of my senior students that this is a great time to pick up a hobby. Like Rushabh was talking about his son and stand-up comedy. I think it's absolutely great. There are so many tons of videos and resources available. So if you have a hobby, it's the best time. And as fathers, we can just ensure that we encourage and support our kids. Talking about my experience of fatherhood during this period, what one thing I can say is that schedules have definitely helped. So, I know a lot of parents on social media talking about how they're creating schedules for their child. I've taken a slightly different approach here. And what I've actually done is I used to make my own schedule, but educator and I had online classes, and I also have teacher meetings on Zoom, etc. So I used to make my schedule, and I used to tell myself, this is, how Papa is organizing his day. After 3-4 times when he saw me doing this, and when his online classes started for his school, he said, Papa, let's make a schedule even for me, so that I know when I can have free play time, when can I watch television, and when I can play with you. So I think it was nice because that endeavor ensured that he also took ownership of the schedule, which is so very important, rather than me enforcing a certain schedule on him. Like Rushabh mentioned, I think that's something which we've also been doing, is to teach him some life skills. Because unlike boarding schools where children are using a lot of things on their own, day school kids are notorious in that sense, because they are reliant on either parents or on maids or house help to doing a lot of things. So my son keeps a room neat and tidy. We actually have a contest, so we have point systems. gets the maximum points at the end of the week, gets an ice cream or some kind of a goodie. So my kid really looks forward to that. And another thing, I think one challenge during the lockdown has been about cell phones. And I'm sure Viral also, as an educator, would agree with that the screen time has actually become a big issue during the lockdown. And how do we manage the screen time for all age group of children? So what I've been doing is how to make that screen time more productive. In fact, I actually got a meme 2 days back from another fellow educator, which said that earlier schools used to have notice that mobile phone and gadgets are not allowed. And today the same schools are actually saying mobile phone and gadgets are needed to continue your education journey. So it's obviously the dichotomy of that is pretty hilarious. So coming back, we how we can actually look at making the screen time more productive. So what I do is I've signed up my kid for Khan Academy, and on Khan Academy there are some amazing gamification based math, English, reading tasks which my son enjoys. So an hour and a half he's engaged every day on that app. The other thing is he also does some online teaching learning from his school. That's half an hour every day. And the other thing which I would definitely like to recommend if your child is an animal lover, the Kruger National Park, which is one of the great national parks in South Africa, they've started virtual safaris. So there is a safari at 5:30 in the morning, and there is a safari at 3:30 in the afternoon. So every afternoon, I and my son log on to that. It's available on YouTube, and you can also chat with park rangers, ask them questions. The Chester Zoo is also live, so you can actually see, the zoo officials feeding animals, and it's great. So my son really enjoys that. So the idea is how do we use this lockdown to actually make screen time more productive, and that's what both me and my wife have actually been doing. The last thing before I move on and move to the next question is reading. So though I am a big advocate of reading, I never used to read very often with my child. The lockdown has given me that liberty of time. So every evening before bedtime for 15 minutes, I read a story to him. As I was telling Viral earlier, because now I'm also very clued on to what is happening in his school. So currently, for example, he's learning about parts of a plant. So I found different stories based on parts of a plant, and every night I read to him the story. We come up with new words, that were part of the story. We've made a vocabulary book, and then he endeavors to use those words in sentences that he actually then shares with his teachers. So these are some of the ways I think my fatherhood has evolved in the lockdown. So coming to the next question, I think the other aspect is, what are some of the tips that both of y'all can share? So Viral, besides having a 2.5-year-old child, Viral also has a nephew and a niece who he's very close to, and it's like all of them stay together, and so hence he has a much more extensive parenting experience, just more than 2.5 years. So what are some tips you've seen your nephew and nieces growing up, and your child also growing up? What are some tips that you can actually give parents from your own journey?
Yeah, so absolutely an overlying theme in parenting that I've learned very quickly, whether it's through my nephew and niece or more intimately with my own child, is that you have to breathe in curiosity while breathing out stability. And that's something like a mantra almost that I would constantly keep in mind as a parent. And I'll repeat it again. It's breathe in curiosity and breathe out stability. And that really is kind of the mantra I use. You have to constantly see their perspective in things while providing the environment that is ideal for growth, for progress, just an environment that they can actually feel safe in and actually develop goals in. So, that being the mantra, the other tip that is extremely important that I would say most people know, but it's very difficult to execute, is that you have to be present. Really being there, not just physically, but emotionally, having a level of empathy that is key to having any type of influence on children. So those are the two things that I would definitely say are the overlying factors. The other thing is intensity never works. It's all about consistency. You have to be consistently there over and over and over again. So that is extremely important. Um, but as far as communication, I would say getting active, getting close and personal. Don't speak to them from the other room. With my child, one thing that has worked very effectively is sort of getting down to his level physically, whether
Hmm.
it's on my knee or making eye contact. It's kind of the difference between what adults experience between an email versus an in-person meeting. And that really is something that is important. Getting quiet is another aspect where a lot of parents, even I used to resort to increasing my volume or my tone, where I've noticed that actually getting quiet or whispering is actually more effective than actually increasing my volume or getting closer to uh, actually getting closer to him and being in a situation that is a little more intimate where he realizes that something serious is going on. And the last thing I would like to also say is giving options. Children uh, unfortunately feel or have a perspective where everything is being forced upon them. So
Hmm.
giving them options is absolutely a great way of getting in touch with them, giving them choices what to wear, what order to do things in. That has worked really well with all age groups. Actually, is really giving them options, gives them a sense of empowerment or a level of collaboration with the parent.
Yes, I thanks Viral. So in fact, yeah, and I absolutely agree with one point that you made there about coming down to their level. So I often also see that even I see that with a lot of preschool teachers, and I'm sure Rusha will agree because his wife is a preschool teacher. That when you chat with a child, rather than towering over them, which is likely to intimidate them, when you come at their level, they realize that you are. It becomes much more empathetic as an approach, and you can actually get reach out to them much more easily. So thanks for those valuable insights. So Rushabh, what is your take? Any parenting tips that you would like to share as a 15-year-old father? What are the different ways in which you use communication to reach out to your child, and some tips that you want to give, parents?
So a couple of days back, I had conversation with my son, and I was reading about a topic which was on communication, and then I asked him, just to get the feedback that what kind of communication I do with you. So he's like, rational. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, you listen, you understand, and then you speak. So I think this is what I have learned, that I think with kids or with anyone else also, we need to respond to them and not react to them. It's when you react, it might be wrong, it might be right, but when you respond, you have thought about it and then you're speaking it. And with Vivan, it's always been, I mean, our communication has been always been open. I think since he was 4 5 year old, and been sharing everything with him. And I think after since 10 11 year old, even if I have a problem, maybe even in the business or maybe in the family or maybe some kind of issues there is, I would always take his opinion in the way of how would he react, just to know that what is he thinking, where is he thinking, or and to also see all these things they don't teach you in school. These are all life skills. These are basically all things which come out of syllabus in life. And so I try to communicate everything with him, and it's very open, very positive, and how we would see, we would also try to find a solution to it. That what if this is the case? What if this would have happened to us? What we would do? So there's basically more of calmness and understanding which is required with your child, to make him your friend, and that's very important. That's my take when it comes to communication with your child.
Great. Yeah, no, I absolutely can relate to it. And, even being a 6-year-old, I think, some of the things which you said, having that open line of communication is so important with your child. So I'll tell you, sometimes with Aran is, and I'm sure you face it with even a 15-year-old. Whenever I ask him, Aran, how was school today? So very rare, he'll just give me monosyllable answers. Okay, school was fine, it was okay. And, I'm wondering that, I'm paying a big fee to your school, and I'm sure you can tell me something more than it was okay. So my wife and I have actually done is we've created this moods meter where we've got different moods where it's anxious, happy, sad, angry. So every day when I come back home, I put out a sticky note on the emotion or the mood that I'm experiencing. And the moment Aram sees that sticky note, he immediately comes up to me and says, Papa, you put a sticky note on anxious. What happened? Why are you anxious today? Or why are you angry today? And then I start talking to him about my day and probably what led me towards feeling anxious. And, before I can ever complete, and till date, I've never completed my entire day story. Aran, comes in, he jumps in, and then he starts talking about his day. Probably something happened in the gym class, something happened in the PE class, or in the Spanish activity class. The teacher told him something. And I think that mood board works really well. It's a great conversation trigger to just get your child to open up, because children have so many emotions and sometimes they're not able to express themselves. As they grow older, they keep a lot of it pent up within themselves. So I think as parents, our endeavor has to be creatively, how can we actually get those emotions out and get them to actually express themselves? That's really, really important. Another thing that we do at home is we have this reflective chair. So that's one corner in the house, and it's not like a dark or a dingy corner. It's just a corner in the house. And whenever Arhan does something which he should not be doing, or he behaves in a way where it's not appropriate, we just tell him to go and just sit in that corner, just gather your thoughts, reflect on what you have done, and once you've composed yourself, come back and talk with us. And that has worked really well for most of the times. I'm not saying that all these are perfect strategies. Parenting is work in progress. I'm sure till our kids don't get married, all of us are learning every day. But on a lot of occasions, that reflective chair works because it just helps to calm himself down. He then starts thinking himself, okay, I should not have done this. And many times he comes back and he says, I'm sorry. And then we can have a rational conversation. The last thing is, again, taking a cue from what both of you all are saying, is also very important. Many times I've seen parents, and I've also been guilty of that. So when Aran is doing something, especially when he's drawing something or he's making something with his blocks, I'll often try and tell him, this is not the way to do it. This is how you can actually do it. Or if you're making a skyscraper with blocks, no, this is your foundation is not very good. Your blocks are going to fall over. And I think at that time, somewhere we kill the creativity of the child because we are trying to impose our thoughts on him. So I follow the strategy called BAR. So BAR is basically big, add and replace. So then first I start telling him, Arhan, that's a fabulous structure that you've made. How could we make it bigger? So the other day he ended up making a paper rocket with a kitchen roll. So every day he tries and finds out things which are not being used at home. And these days, because all of us are at home in the lockdown, there are a lot of things which are coming out, which have not been used. And he tries and creates something. So I use the BAR strategy. I ask him, how can we make this bigger? What can we add in this? So can we add some colors? Can we add, so the other day when he made the rocket, there were some white patches. So I said, can we add some colors to this? And then what can be replaced so that this resembles an actual rocket? So the idea of that strategy is, rather than outrightly telling him, what you have made doesn't look like a rocket, it's actually nice to, first appreciate him and then guide him, provide him constructive criticism on how he could actually create something which actually resembles a rocket. So those are, my 2 bits of how I, look at and some tips which I would like to share with parents and with to-be parents. So coming to our next question is, there is also a lot of buzz about mindfulness, and a lot of teachers are talking, schools are talking about mindfulness in teaching and learning. So obviously mindfulness also plays a big role when we are talking about parenting. So Viral, what is your take of mindful parenting, and how important do you think communication is in mindful parenting?
No, absolutely. With mindful parenting, the thing that keeps coming to my mind immediately is the environment. A lot of their communication that goes on throughout the day, whether it's in an adult's workplace or from a perspective of a child at school or at home, the environment gives you a lot of the communication. It sort of sets your mood, and it really plays a lot into how you perceive things. So absolutely, with mindful communication and parenting, that environment is what I would really encourage educators and parents to protect or preserve or even establish further. And I'd like to, give a little bit of an analogy here. Imagine your favorite song, something you have a very emotional attachment to. Maybe it's something you grew up with or something you've recently heard that you love, and it really resonates with you. Now, imagine if I keep the lyrics but I actually swap out the music that is in that song. How would that song change? If I take something that you have an emotional connection to, as far as a song, keep the lyrics, and then change the music to heavy metal, for example, that whole song, how it resonates to you, the whole communication changes. And it's exactly like that with parenting. And it's extremely important that educators and parents are very mindful of their communication, and through that mindful communication, establish a level of empathy, and establish an environment that is filled with trust, and filled with safety, almost an emotional safety, where they can actually start to express themselves or build connections with those around them.
Great. No, absolutely. Thank you, Viral, for sharing those. And before I share my perspective, Rushabh, what is your take on the importance of mindfulness in communication, especially that parents have with kids? Because there is so much talk about mindfulness in schools, but obviously what doesn't get so much focus is about parenting and the importance of mindful
Sorry,
communication in
what did you
parenting.
say? I couldn't hear you. This is what I call as mindfulness. So when you are listening, you're not supposed to do anything else. And actually, what is mindfulness? It is actually a vipassana which has been re-imported from West, which we've been doing years and ages. And mindfulness is, we are generally, there's a difference between talking at your children and talking to your children. And when you're busy, you're talking at your children, not to them. And it's very important to pay attention what they're talking, especially their tone, their body language, because you learn a lot of things. There are certain things, there are many kids who are inexpressive, especially if I've seen many boys who are inexpressive. So it's better to understand, to listen to them, to put all your things on side, and then listen to them that what they actually want to say. So that's the more biggest difference. And in my case, what I do is, if he wants to talk about something, okay, so we've decided time, or we have this chat where we message that these are the topics we are supposed to talk on. So that time everything else is on site, and then we talk on that topic. This is what the topic is, and we three of us sit together and we have this discussion on the topics given. And it might be a one liner, two liner, three liner, but we still have this thing that this is how we are supposed to do. And again, especially with younger kids, it's better you repeat what your kid is saying, because then they know, my dad or my mom is listening to me, and this is how it is. And also what I learned was, like how you said, when Arhan makes something, you don't tell him that the base is not right, or it's you can, before criticizing them, or even before saying them or imposing your thoughts, you should understand why they are doing this, and always show them a way that how better this can be done, and then let them think and do about it. You see, they are also open to it. It's not that they are rigid. They probably don't know, and they have a different way to experience it, and they need to experience on their own. But there's also, since we have more experience, we can always find a way to show it to them that this is how you can do it, and then let them see. Like even with my son, when certain times the things which he does on his own way, and then many times he's also right. And there are certain times where I have given him an idea, try this way, this is the how way. I mean, maybe we are recently deciding, which song he's supposed to sing for the next lockdown thing, and there were two songs we were deciding on. So, and then he came up with totally third song, and he sang all three songs, and he recorded himself, and he's like, okay, then I prefer, that the song which he was saying is actually sounding much better. So, you always need to give them that space and be with them when they're talking, because they have different ways of communication.
Right. And I absolutely agree, because mindfulness is just not meditation. A lot of people think, mindfulness is meditation. And like the West have done with so many good Indian things, right? They take an Indian concept, they package it nicely and neatly, and they sell it back to us. And that's the same thing with Vipassana and mindfulness also. But mindfulness is all about, just living in the moment, being aware and being non-judgmental about your feelings and about people around you. And I once again agree, it's when we talk about listening is just much more than just hearing to your child. It's also paying attention to body language, the tone, etc. So absolutely, I think that's the importance. So if as parents, if we listen to our kid, and many times I've seen, and I do that very, very often with Aran also, when he's expressing himself, sometimes I pause him, and I try and impose my thoughts on him. And that I've consciously realized, I consciously now try and avoid that. I let him complete what he wants to say, and then I share my perspective or my take on what he has to say. So I think that's very important, where we allow the child to finish expressing whatever he or she wants to say before we give him our constructive feedback or suggestion. So the next round is something that we have created for this Fathers Cafe, is a little different compared to the normal webinars. What we've done is we've taken 3 different scenarios, and these are scenarios which I'm sure all parents can relate to. You would have faced this kind of a scenario very often in your life, and I would want the perspective of both our parenting experts to talk about how would they handle this scenario. So the first scenario is on temper tantrum. And obviously, temper tantrums is more for the younger age groups. So if I'm looking at, the early primary as well as up to the, upper primary. So Rushabh, Viral, what is your take? If your child throws a temper tantrum, what are your strategies to tackle that?
Yeah, it happens. Toddlers are, terrible listeners. Absolutely. But with temper tantrums, it's I go back to that mantra of mine, where you have to breathe out stability, and in that moment, it's extremely important to not lose your cool, and actually see and sort of step away from the situation and actually observe it as to what did the child really want, what went wrong. But it's all about living through it with a sense of grace or a sense of stability. Often I tell my son, even during a temper tantrum, comforting words that I know that will help him ease that moment. But the approach that I usually take with temper tantrums is I am looking out for the triggers. I'm trying to basically figure out what the trigger of that situation was, and in my approach going forward, what I end up doing is determining ways of actually making sure that those triggers are not seen again. For example, my child loves going to the mall. Previous to the lockdown, we used to go all the time. And there's a particular playground that he loves to play in within the mall. And often we get to that playground with not much time left, or he's extremely tired and he's hungry and he doesn't realize he shouldn't play right now. That's why he's getting frustrated. But setting expectations in advance that, hey, we are going to the mall, we are going to play with the playground. So speaking about things up front and establishing some ground rules, or actually speaking about the trigger points in advance has been a huge successful endeavor on my end to sort of keep the temper tantrums down to a minimum. But when they do occur, which they will occur, the key thing that is extremely difficult to do is to stay calm, keep your grace, and actually be empathetic to your child in that moment.
Yes, I agree. In fact, I've also learned this the hard way, where I think, that's not the time to rationalize with your child when he's throwing a temper tantrum. I think it's really important that we maintain our cool. So both what my wife and I do is we just tell Aran that, yes, we love you. We are there for you. Once you're ready to talk to us, then, we are there for you. We just ensure he's safe, because sometimes, temper tantrums can take on different kinds of forms, right? Sometimes they can also be explosive, where, kids may end up harming themselves. So you have to just be careful with that bit. So Rushabh, a 15-year-old father, what is your take on temper tantrums? I'm sure the tantrums which your son perhaps would throw are very different from, Viral's 2.5-year-old. And what are your strategies of handling those?
So temper tantrums with a teenager comes with the hormonal changes. So if you feel that part, it's very easy then. There's certain times, you have, they throw their tantrums and there's nothing wrong in it, because we all are like that. We all are moody. And but at that time, if you are aware enough, if you are conscious enough, this is what is nothing but just a reaction to something. What we do is we give him space. And since we both love humor, we are funny at all the time. And first thing is we try to give him space. But if it is like on a dinner table, if it happens and if it's instant, which is not needed, so I just get up and take out the ice plates from the refrigerator and put him on his head. Just cool down, relax. Or best thing is to give them the space. This is what they love, and I think after half an hour, 1 hour, they are normal back, and then we can always discuss the same point. Then otherwise, I would rather prefer to speak about it later after an hour or so, because at that point of time, even we might tend to lose our temper, because how can in India it is like, how can your son be yes back answer? You have this thing.
Right.
So it's better you understand that it's all hormonal changes. Even you have gone through, like, if being a ninth grader, even you have gone through the same thing. So you should know that this is very common. This happens, and I would always see that what was I when I was in ninth grade? How were my friends? How was I? How would I have reacted? So then it becomes easy to communicate with them, is to understand them and see, in the end, we love them, they love us, there's nothing wrong in it. And I would also say
Right.
that if your child hasn't got that hatred for you at any point of time, then you are a bad parent. A good parent will see to it that child has got that hatred for him at certain points of time. Why? Because that's where you are doing the right thing for him, which he will understand later, which we do understand now when we realize, okay, what our parents did was right at that point of time. So point
Right. Right. Yeah.
to space, and they will.
Yes, and in fact, yeah, I think the realization does come quite late. That yes, what my parent was saying. Perhaps sometimes the realization may come in, like, I know for me, a lot of times, when I'm parenting Aran, I realize that yes, what my mom and dad were telling me was actually made so much more sense. So I think when you become a parent yourself, you tend to reflect back on things that you did. So I agree with you. In fact, what we do with Aran is, there are certain things like Aran loves the Mr. Men series of books. So I don't know if both of you are familiar. So it's an entire series of books. So whenever he gets very angry, he throws a tantrum. We leave him, we give him his space, and I and Tasneem start reading the book within a earshot of him. The moment I start reading the book, he immediately gets his attention gets diverted towards what am I reading? What is the story? Is it a new book? Perhaps I may not have read this story, and suddenly he forgets about the temper tantrum. I do the same thing with Uno cards. My son loves Uno. So I and my wife start playing Uno the moment he throws a temper tantrum. And then I shout loudly, oh, I've got a draw 4, I've got a draw 2. And suddenly Aran, then he comes right next to me. And then a couple of minutes, he'll say, okay, Papa, in the next round, can you please deal me cards? I also want to play. So, these are just some tricks of the trade that I have also learned over a period of time. And, they work, they're quite effective. Some children I know, some of my friends say they have an angry song. So if the child is very angry, the mom and dad just start singing that song, and they start stomping their feet loudly. So I think to each to his own. But yes, one thing which we all three agree upon is that temper tantrum is very natural. It's part of growing up. It's part of that parenting journey. The more we accept the fact and we move on, the better it is. One thing which is very important is I never make temper tantrum on teachable moments. And this is where the educator in me, the Hussain, is talking, and not the parent. Temper tantrum is not a moment where you can teach the child that what he did was wrong, etc. So if after 4 days, 5 days, 2 weeks, if your child doesn't bring up that tantrum, as a parent, you should not bring that tantrum up and discuss about why you did that, etc. Let's forget it. Let's move on. I'm sure there will be a bigger tantrum which is on the anvil. So let's forget what has happened in the past. Coming to our next scenario. So this scenario, actually, I've taken it from the movie Life is Beautiful. I don't know how many of you all have seen it. So I'll just give you some context of the movie. This was an Italian movie produced sometime in the late 80s. And it talks about, a father and a son who were taken into a Nazi concentration camp. And the son was very, very small. And this entire scenario was so negative. So what the father did is he said, we are actually in a game. And every day he gave him certain tasks to be done. And that game and those tasks helped the child actually survive that the entire concentration camp and emerge triumphant. So, to both of you all, my question is, Viral, first to you is, how do you, here we see, the protagonist of this movie faced this very negative situation, and it can't get more negative than a concentration camp. I'm not saying any of us will face, that kind of a tragedy ever in our lives. But how do, in your parenting journey, if you come across a negative scenario, how do you make it more positive for your child? What do you say to your child? How do you communicate with him so that he starts taking that situation more positively?
Right. And with my particular scenario with the 2.5-year-old, there's a lot more of me talking than him talking, obviously. But it's about just being very expressive in my thought process as to what the challenge is, what the emotions are in the moment. I'll give you an example. This is something that happened with my son. He's very attached to being home, especially with his mom. And when school started, when preschool started for him, basically, and he was very reluctant to actually let mom go and actually go into the classroom or into the school. So he's very observant as a child and knows exactly where we're going at that time in the day. And it's morning, we get in the car, shoes are on, and we're going towards school. He knows exactly where we're going. He has his guesses. And once we arrive at school, he starts feeling emotionally different. He's worried. He's starting to see, I think we're going to school. I don't want to go to school. And what ended up happening is, I had to really employ a huge amount of patience. And what we ended up doing is we would literally get in the car, go to school, get to the front door, and I would be, talking him through it. But if he felt that he did not want to, we would actually turn back and try again the next day. And we would basically go a little bit further in. He would observe other children going past him that, oh, wow, okay, it seems like they're going. There were interesting things in the hallway in the school that he would notice. But eventually it took, a serious level of patience and a couple of weeks. But at some point, when he was allowed to kind of be in that safe environment and go to school and approach it and not feel forced, he himself sort of walked closer and closer to his classroom door as each day went on. And that that attachment is still there because he knows that mom or dad will come back to pick him up. And it was a huge emotional thing for me and for my wife to actually see him sort of go through that emotional struggle. But to answer your question, again, going back to environment, giving him that love and support and facing it with him and not forcing it upon him that, no, it's time to go to school. You got to go. Everybody else is going. Allowing him to actually take that week or two to adjust was extremely important. Now he actually enjoys going to the classroom. You can still see a change in emotion, but he knows that you're going to be back to pick him up. So
Right, right. No, absolutely. And in fact, so what I do with my little one is, that there are times where, when he gets some work from school and he says, I cannot do this or this is very difficult, I actually use his favorite cartoon show. So he loves Paw Patrol, and the cartoon show has Ryder and six pups. And the tagline of the show is, no job is too small, and no job is too big, no pup is too small. So I use that tagline. So whenever he feels that I cannot do something or this is too difficult, I just say that tagline. I say, how would Ryder and the six pups actually handle the situation? I'm sure they would not, give up so easily. And suddenly there is a spring in his steps. So parents, if you have, your child adores a certain character, a certain cartoon, a certain superhero, use certain character traits of that to try and turn a negative situation into a positive one. Rusha, what is your perspective on this? And I'm sure as a teenage father, there are tons of situations where, you come across where, with the competition, with, as he moves on with university placements, there would be, so, there are times when children get very negative. And how would you instill positivity into his life?
So talking about the movie Life is Beautiful, I think I learned one thing from that was don't worry your children and love them. So even if there are issues in his life, say maybe he chose to stand for some position in school and was not selected. And so what I have learned from my experience is everything happens for the best. So when it happened that day, he was very upset, and I told him that I mean that's not the time to tell him whatever happens for the best. We understood that, we took it, and after a day or two, we told him it must have happened for a reason, and the reason is always going to be good. And then he saw that, in the next 6 months, there were lots of other things he wanted to do, which he wouldn't have been able to do had he got that position in the school. So this is how I show him, there's everything positive in every situation. And whatever you do, whatever happens, it happens for us. You give your best, you give your 1000%, and then let the results be whatever it is. But you should not lack in your perseverance and your hard work. You do yours, and then let it be, because whatever happens in the end is always going to be good. So that's how we keep seeing all positive things in life. That's how it is.
Yes, right. Absolutely. What we can do as parents is always stand behind them, stand by them, and just ensure as long as they put in a good effort, I think that's more than what we can ask for. So very quickly, before we can take some questions from the audience, we will do a quick rapid fire. So I'm a big Bollywood fan, and I've watched most of Karan Johar's, Coffee with Karan episodes. So what I'll do is I'll put both my panelists on the hot seat. I'll ask them all questions relating to parenting and to communication. But like Coffee with Karan, you cannot obviously take a lot of time to think about your answer. Whatever the first thing which pops into your head, you need to say it out loud. So Viral, I'll first put you in the hot seat. Are you ready?
Ready.
Coffee, that whole bunch we get.
Yeah. So sadly with the lockdown, with everything shut, but I'll ensure that the SLN will send both of you all a coffee hamper, once the lockdown restrictions are eased. So one word, Viral, to describe your parenting journey so far.
One word, huh? Humbling.
Okay. If your child was a superhero, which one would he be?
Daredevil.
One adjective to describe your child.
Risk taker.
The worst advice that you received as a parent.
Say that again.
The worst advice that you received as a parent, or advice which you did not pay too much heed to, something you think that it didn't make a lot of sense.
You're prepared.
If you were to star in a film with your son, what would the name of the film be?
Growing up together.
A parenting book that you would recommend?
There's a book by I think it's Jessica Leahy, The Gift of Failure. I'd highly recommend that.
Okay. So that's about it. Since we are short on time, I'll cut it to that question. Rushabh, are you ready?
Yes, kind of.
Okay. So one word to describe your parenting journey.
Fun.
Okay. One adjective to describe your child.
Adjective to describe my child.
Yes.
Best.
And one advice that you received as a father which you think didn't really make sense.
Control them.
Yeah, because especially Indian relatives, everybody has advices by the dozen, right? When you become a father or a parent, everybody seems to give you a stockload of advice. Sometimes not all of it actually makes sense. If you were to star in a film with your son, what would the name of the movie be?
Tera yaar hoon main.
Okay. One memory from your parenting journey that is something which is etched in your memory. Any one moment from your parenting journey.
It touches every time he hugs me till date. When he comes to go and hug him every day, irritate him.
Okay, great. That's it. Thank you, Rushabh, for that.
Hussain, I think you also need to ask some questions.
Yes. Okay. So I knew I had actually, the moment I thought of the Coffee with Karan, I knew it's going to fall upon me also. So yes, I'm ready. Go.
So your one word to describe your parenting journey?
Exhilarating.
And if your child was a superhero, which one would that be?
Yeah, so Spider-Man. I think my entire building, the whole of Kalpataru knows that, Spider-Man is, the character that my son absolutely adores. Yeah.
A parenting book you would recommend?
Diaper Dude. So it's a very fun book. It's available on Kindle. And especially if you're a to-be parent, or if your child is between 1 to 2 years old, definitely I recommend. It offers a very humorous take on parenting, some very smart anecdotes. So it's a cool book.
And if you were to star in a film with your child, what would the name be?
Papa's Pathshala. So there,
Papa.
I'll actually, yes, and I'll actually be a little this. I've actually started a page. The lockdown has given all of us so much time. So I've realized there are so many mommy self-help groups, on Facebook and on different platforms. There aren't as many groups for fathers. So what I've done is over the last couple of weeks, I've been working on something. And just last week, I launched a Facebook page called Papa's Pathshala and an Instagram handle. The idea is just to basically build a community of fathers where we can share and collaborate on everything pertaining to parenting, because all of us are in this together.
And the last question is
Yes,
the one adjective to describe your child.
affectionate. Great. So thank you, Viral, and thank you, Rushabh. So we will now take some questions from the audience. Any one of you all would like to take this question? Viral, you all can see the question, right, on the screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I can take it.
Okay.
So, no, absolutely. There's, I would say, an abundance of attention going on right now in the family structure. But, I would say let that be an inspiration. Some portion or some percentage of that will go on. But, I absolutely agree that, part of that question is that how will you actually follow that same schedule when everybody's busy again? I would say let that be an inspiration to what can be on the family schedule moving forward. But while the lockdown is continued, I would still give them that space, let them be them. And again, like I mentioned, I would take this time that we have that is in abundance currently as more of an observation time, more of a time to reflect on parenting as to what to do moving forward.
I like to add to it. We go for vacations weeks during summer break, and then how we come back. So it's going to be like this. It's like we have on a vacation where the whole family is together, no work, nothing, and all of a sudden you're back to your routines. It takes that 1, 2, 3 days to get adjusted to. Oh my God, now we're back to work, back to the grind, back to the rat race, and I think life goes on. Like how we are not used to lockdown, now we are used to lockdown. Again, we'll be back to the same life.
Yeah, and I think in that sense, kids are also very adaptable.
Yeah,
Yes, but I think it's a great question. But because I'm sure because the kids are so used to both parents being there and showering all this attention, suddenly, once all of this, the life resumes back to normal, it'll obviously be difficult. It will take some time. But like Rushabh said, yeah, it's just like we have a holiday, we have had this lockdown, and I'm sure it'll take some time, but all of us will get back. But I think the big takeaway would be that I'm sure as fathers, we will all start spending a lot more time now in the new normal than when we would then what we have been actually doing in the past. Just waiting for another question to come up on the screen. So Chetan, so before I get, Viral and Rushabh's take, like I was saying earlier, I try and use, my child's favorite cartoon or favorite character and ask him that, this character never gives up. So how is it that, you watch this character, you adore this character? How is it that you are giving up? So that in many instances that motivates him, and that brings a spring in his step, and he tries to give one more attempt at that task. So at least I think for a 5, 6 year old, that using that strategy works really well. Both of you all would you all want to add something to that?
What I would say is, I think till the age of 7, 8, 9, I think you are still experiencing. And please, nowadays with so much of pressure, a mother or a father, they want their kids to do everything. He's doing karate, he's doing hockey, he's doing football, and every possible thing they make him do. But then you need to see what are his interests, what he's good at, and then eventually you start discarding those things. Don't come under pressure just because the neighbor is doing swimming, so we need to do the swimming. But he's reached some gold medal, so we have to. There's nothing like that. It's a child interest which is very much important, because just imagine if you are a banker and you've been told to draw, sketch something, you're not going to like it. when you are not a creative person. So it's the same ways with the child. Everybody has their own aspiration. Everybody has their own what do you call it, interest, and it's better to make them better in their what they are what is their interest in, and that actually will be very helpful for them.
And what I would add to that is basically if you're taking a task that the child feels challenged with, break it down into smaller bits. Don't try to accomplish the entire task. Every task can be broken down into subtasks or baby steps, if you will, and help them see the hope that you see in accomplishing the task.
Yes, thank you, Khatija, for your question. How to deal with strong-headed teenagers? So, amongst the three of us, we have one 15-year-old father. So I'll let him take this question first before we share our inputs on this.
So my answer is like, how would you deal with a strong-headed spouse? Teenager is nothing but he's part of you. He's you. So if you can deal with a strong-headed spouse, I mean, not everybody goes on separation because you have a strong-headed spouse. It's how you adjust with them, how you try to understand them, how you try to be in their shoes, like what I said earlier also, like I try and understand what was I when I was in class 9, how were my friends, how were certain of my friends who were like, someone was a bad batch, one was a very good batch, and so how would they react, how were we treated at that point of time. Right now it is too much of openness where we speak to our kids. At our time we can't even say anything to our parents, right? Or if they weren't even involved into our life so much, because they would just come to know only when we come in 10th, they'll come to know, okay, my son is in 10th. Otherwise they were, I mean, generally fathers wouldn't be even aware of it. So this is point is, you need to understand them, you need to get into their shoes, you need to feel what they are feeling, and then you will understand. I mean, it's easy. It's like how you handle your people who are strong-headed around you. The same way, he's your child. I mean, that's who best, but you can do that and understand him.
Viral, you would like to add something before we take the next question?
Yeah, it's really all about giving them choices. Get involved with that strong-headed teenager as to why are they thinking what they're thinking. Filter some choices and let them ultimately take or pick out of the choices that you sort of agree with in a collaboration. And the other thing I would like to say is that when it comes to parenting, some people fear, or there's a negative connotation to negotiation. Negotiate. It's okay. I think we all do it with our spouses, and nothing is different with strong-headed teenagers. So negotiate with them, help them understand your perspective as well.
And I think negotiation will definitely become a key, because as I also help students with a lot of career options, and I know students currently who are in grade 12 who are looking at continuing their studies in the US or in Canada, etc. With all this uncertainty, they are so anxious. Every other day I get emails from kids in terms of what are the next steps. And I think at this stage parents would play a very, very important role in just to calming them down. Going to an American university or not going is not the end of the world. There are so many other options, but just having that frank chat. I also sometimes realize that when if parents have a heart to heart and a frank chat, a lot of issues can also be sorted out in that way. So the next question is, Pradipti, what are the top values that you look to instill in your kids?
It's always compassion. For me, it's always compassion and kindness.
Right.
Because if you're compassionate, I think the rest of the values will be taken care of.
Right. Viral?
There's two values, or I would say values or skills that I constantly am looking for, because I think it makes for a great learner, is honesty and courage. Being honest enough to say that, hey, I don't know what I'm doing here, or being very honest and in touch with reality, and then having the courage to do something about it.
Correct. Yeah. And for me, I think it's all about, being really caring. I think that's something which, given the kind of environment that we are living in, and, that's again related to, what Rusha was talking about, kindness. I think developing caring students is the endeavor for all of us. That should be the endeavor that all of us should strive for. because that's the one trait or the one attribute that will make the world so much a much better place than what it already is. So Mr. Mahmood has asked a question: son easy or daughter easy to handle temper tantrums? So Mr. Kadri, I only have a son and I don't have a daughter, but at least what I've heard of, daughters are fairly easy to handle, because probably I think the intensity of their temper tantrums is not as much as boys. I may be wrong, because as I said, this is only from hearsay. Yes, with boys, temper tantrums can get difficult as they grow up, and that's the reason why I had put that as a scenario also. Viral, you also have a niece also. So what is your take on it? Do you think girls are easier to handle than boys?
There's one thing I've noticed just through education and through my niece and comparing it to my nephew or my son is that girls tend to mature with communication skills a little bit faster. So that becomes a tool in the toolbox in actually handling or communicating during a temper tantrum. So that definitely is helpful in actually approaching it. But other than that, I don't think gender has anything to do with it.
For me, I think but natural girls they mature quite early. They understand very much. But yes, you need to take care during those 4 or 5 days where their tantrums go up and down because of the hormonal changes. I think that's when it is. Otherwise, I think it's girls easier than boys.
Okay, so our next question is by Mr. Prakash. He's asking what level to interacting with a child as a young adult, their most impressionable age band 6 years, 6 to 10, 10 to 14, do you recommend? So what is your take, Viral?
Just one second. I'm trying to understand
Yeah.
the question here.
Yeah, I'm actually not very, very clear. Mr. Prakash, if you could actually just, clarify what you are exactly asking.
I think he's asking which is the impressionable age and which age sectors is below 6.
So I think the most impressionable age has to be the below 6 itself. And I think the formative years, that's where everything is developed. So even, initially we were talking about reading or talking about, the other habits and that we are looking at inculcating in kids. All of that has to happen. The most impressionable age, and a lot of early years research also proves that, that age group is the critical element. In fact, the new education policy also, which is sadly because of the lockdown, that's also in limbo. But that also now recognizes the fact, and the first time that the central government has recognized the importance of early childhood. So I think the early childhood, that's up to around grade 2, grade 3, that's where it's really, really important. And those are the foundation years. Because all the skills and things that get developed during that age, that sets the foundation and that sets, the course for the rest of the years.
The only thing I would add to that is, I guess everything gets established during the K through 5 school years, and it is really during 6 through 8. And I'm giving my American education school system what we call middle school, basically, where sixth grade through 8th grade is when they really become more individuals and start doing what I would call independent learning, or trying to apply the things that they've established through K through 5, basically.
Right. So Rushabh, how is it with with Vivan? So do you think now he's like an independent adult, or there is still require that kind of support from from you and your wife?
No. I think since he was 12, 13, we've seen to that.
Right.
He is an independent. He travels alone since the class. I think since the age of 8, he has been
Right.
alone. And I mean, nowadays, if I go out with him and we have to pack bags, he does for me because he's much better at it, and I still don't know how to pack the bags. So yeah, he's been very independent, and we've seen to it that this is how, because coming as a single child, we saw to it that
Right.
he is independent in all his things possible, because generally when you have a sibling around, you have someone to take care of. But we have, since it was a decision to never have a second child, so we chose to make him independent as early as possible, and he's happy and quite mature about it.
Right. No, thanks, and thanks, to all our participants, to all the viewers, for putting all those questions, and I think, are there any more questions coming before we call it a wrap? Just wait for a couple of minutes. Okay, great. So thank you, Viral. Thank you, Rushabh, for making time. I'll not say busy schedule because I think time is the only luxury that all of us have these days.
And this is for our
thank
child.
you. Yes. Thank you for sharing your points, your perspectives. It was really enriching. It was nice to listen to all of you. And I'm sure there has been a lot of takeaway for our audience also. Audience, what we will also be doing is three of us have put together some takeaways in the form of strategies, etc., that we would be emailing to all the registered participants. So these are things which you could try out with your own child, keeping your own context in mind. And I'm sure that'll help you. What I'll do is before we go, I'll finally leave you with some lines of a beautiful poem that I recently came across. It's called One Final Touch. So I'll just read some of the lines. I'm just opening the Word document file for that. Give me a moment. Yeah. So if a child lives with hostility, he learns to fight. If a child lives with ridicule, he learns to be shy. If a child learns with fear, he learns to be apprehensive. If a child learns with acceptance, he learns to love. If a child lives with recognition, he learns to be good and to have a goal. So thank you very much to all our audience and to Rushabh and Viral once again. Thank you, Francis, for helping us with all the text. And this is not the last SLN show. We have another one coming up next week. So please tune in for that. Thank you once again. Goodbye and stay safe. Be healthy. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.